Yo, this is Afro, aka All Flows Reach Out, and you're listening to Built for This Network. Yes, sir. From the building, stay bomb.
Hey, yeah, we're the same brothers from a long time ago. We was talking about television and doing it on the radio. What we did was to help our generation realize they got to get out there and get busy because it wasn't going to be televised. We got respect for young rappers and the way they freeway up. But if you're going to be teaching folks things, be sure you know what you're saying. Older folks in our neighborhood got plenty of know-how. Remember, if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be out there now. And I ain't coming at you with no disrespect. All I'm saying is that you damn well got to be correct. Because if you're going to be speaking for a whole generation and you know enough to try and handle their education, be sure you know the real deal about past situations and ain't just repeating what you heard on a local TV station. Sometimes they tell lies and put them in a truthful disguise. But the truth is, that's why we said it wouldn't be televised. They don't know what to say to our young folks, but they know that you do. And if they really knew the truth, why would they tell you? The first sign is peace. Tell all them gun-toting young brothers that the man is glad to see us out there killing one another. We raised too much hell when they were shooting us down, so they started poisoning our mind and trying to jerk us all around. And then they tell us they got to come in and control our situation. They want half of us on dope and the other half in incarceration. If the ones they want dead ain't killed by what they instigated, they can put some dope on the brother's body and claim it was drug-related. Tell them drug-related means there don't need to be no investigation, or at least that's the way they're gonna play it on the local TV station. All your 9mm brothers, give them something to think about. Tell them you heard that this is the new word. They got to work that stuff out. Because somehow they feeling the wrong way with a gun in their hands. They feeling real independent, but they just pulling contracts with a man. 5 and 5 will tell you it's hopeless out there on the avenue, but if they really knew the truth, why would they tell you? And if they look at you like you're insane and they start calling you scarecrow and say you ain't got no brain, or start telling folks that you suddenly gone lame, or that white folks that finally co-opted your game, or worse yet, implying that you don't really know, that's the same thing they said about us a long time ago. Young rappers, one more suggestion before I get out of your way. But I appreciate the respect you give me and what you got to say. I'm saying protect your community and spread that respect around. Tell brothers and sisters they got to calm that bullshit down. Because we're terrorizing our old folks and we brought fear into our homes. And they ain't got to hang out with the senior citizens. Just tell them, damn it, leave the old folks alone. And we know who ripping off the neighborhood. Tell them that BS has got to stop. Tell them you're sorry they can't handle it out there, but they got to take the crime off the block. And if they look at you like they think you're insane, or start calling you scarecrow thinking you ain't got no brain, or start telling folks that you suddenly gone lame, or that white folks have suddenly co-opted your game, or worse yet, saying that you really don't know, that's the same thing they said about me a long time ago. And if they tell folks that you finally lost your nerve, that's the same thing they said about us when we said Johannesburg. But I think you young folks need to know that things don't go both ways. You can't talk respect on every other song or just every other day. What I'm speaking on now is the raps about the women folks. On one song, she's your African queen, and on the next one, she's a joke. And you ain't said no words that I haven't heard, but that ain't no compliment. It only insults 8 people out of 10 and questions your intelligence. 4-letter words or 4-syllable words won't make you a poet. It will only magnify how shallow you are and let everybody know it. And if they look at you like they think you're insane, or they call you scarecrow thinking you ain't got no brain, or start telling folks that you suddenly gone lame, or that the white folks have finally co-opted your game, or you really don't know, they said that about me a long time ago. If they finally start telling people that you lost your nerve, that's what they said about Johannesburg. You ain't insane. You have got a brain. You haven't gone lame. You have got your game. Remember, keep the nerve. Keep the nerve. Keep the nerve. Keep the nerve. We're talking about peace.
Hello. Good evening. This is me, HRap, with special guest Phil Dixon. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is Rappin with HRap. I have a friend of the show. This is his second appearance on the program, different platform, second appearance. Thank you for joining me this evening. We have historian, baseball aficionado, Negro League aficionado, Phil Dixon. How you doing this evening, Phil?
Hey, doing great. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
All right, perfect.
It's good to talk with you again. I had an outstanding time speaking with you the very first time. Good to have you back on the end of the bench. How have you been?
I have been busy, coming off a great year, and had a chance to go out to Cooperstown this year for the Buck O'Neill induction.
Oh, that was awesome.
A lot of Big Papi fans out there, I can tell you. And I was in Benton Harbor, Michigan, out there doing work with the House of David baseball team and that whole history, how it relates to the Negro Leagues and baseball as a whole. Let's see. Well, boy, where else did I go this year? I've been lots of places. And headed to the Rose Bowl tomorrow. I have a great nephew, Jalen Dixon, who plays for the Utah Utes. And so I'm going to actually go to the Rose Bowl and actually know someone who's playing in the Rose Bowl.
That's awesome. Man, it's always good to hear from you. I still follow you on social media. I saw you were doing book signings the other day, and that's what made me reach out to you. Talk to me about that new book.
Yeah, the new book. It's called John Buck O'Neill, The Rookie, His Words, His Voice. And, people have heard of Buck O'Neill. And so what I did was I took his history from the day he was born up to the first season that he played with the Kansas City Monarchs. So we went through the entire 1938 season with a fine-tooth comb. So if you go out and you look for history on the Negro Leagues, you'll find nothing better on the 1938 season than what's in Buck's book. I interviewed a lot of people, and it was probably about a 30-year work to get it to that point. Now, what's interesting about the book, it's the first ever sports book to use QR codes. So when you get the book, you scan QR codes, and you'll actually hear Buck talking on certain topics, what they talked about on the bus, certain players. I know he talks about Joe Green, and who was a catcher from Stone Mountain, Georgia. He talks about Ted Strong, who was a great right fielder who joined them late in the season. But of course, most people may know him from the Harlem Globetrotters. So, but it's a different spin, and I think it's something that's going to catch on. We just happen to be the first out the gate in the whole sports world. So, the Negro Leaguers are still setting the trend. Hell, how about that?
Hey, that's always good to hear. Man, Buck O'Neill is a person who I don't think enough people even know about. When you say Buck O'Neill, that name should be with Wally Pep. That name should be with Babe Ruth. That name should be with Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and everybody else. Because Buck O'Neill was the first individual that gave me eyes on the Negro League. Yeah, I know Willie Mays and Hank were there, but it seemed as if to me Buck O'Neill was immersed in the Negro Leagues. They were there for a brief period of time, and then they transitioned to the major leagues, and then the rest is history. But Buck O'Neill was the dude that ESPN put front and center in front of young Brian Williams, young HRap, and made me realize this was something that was paramount to our history. Being a history buff, it was very important to me to get to know who he was, and I'm glad that you've done this book. But before we get started, I want to reintroduce you because, again, this is a different platform. This is a different medium. I was just doing audio when we initially connected. Now I'm doing visual and audio on a different network. What I want to do is introduce my audience to Mr. Phil Dixon, and give them a brief description of who you are, please. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I am you might say, a lifelong baseball historian and fan. I was a kid who started off collecting baseball cards in 1964. And were you born yet?
6 years before me.
Okay. And I started collecting baseball cards, and I was pretty much immersed in the history. I didn't live far from. Actually, I was born in Kansas City, Kansas,
Okay.
and and where I lived in Kansas City, Kansas, it was a all black community. Born there in '56, so people like Eddie Dwight, who played for the Kansas City Monarchs, played center field. He lived across the alley from me.
Wow.
Across the street from me was the mother of Tommy Campbell. He was a lightweight contender, maybe the third rated lightweight in the world in 1949, 50, 51. So sports was all around. And my first baseball coach was Sherman Jones, Sherman Roadblock Jones. He was the first black to pitch. Actually, he pitched opening day in Shea Stadium, 1962. So I got good baseball instruction from the very beginning, and that was the humble beginning. I met my first baseball player when I was in the 5th grade, and it was Reggie Smith. He didn't even play for a Kansas City team. It turns out he had a relative who was playing on my team, and so he came and gave us a pep talk, and they ended up going to the World Series that year. And man, that really locked me in. Because now I'm seeing somebody I just met on TV. You know, we didn't
right. That had to be tremendous.
Yeah, and an athlete too. And so through the years, I followed baseball history. I was always that kid that people would say, this guy knows a lot about baseball, right? But come through about 1980, I knew all this baseball history, had absorbed many books, the backs of baseball cards, you name it. But I knew very little about the Negro Leagues until I ran into Carroll Ray Mothel, who played for Ruth Foster in 1920, played for the Kansas City Monarchs from, I think, 2023 to 1934. And he developed rotator cuff problems, and he retired. So he was actually the first Negro Leaguer that I engaged with. And that was in 1980. And when he began to talk, I realized I knew about baseball, but there was a whole aspect of baseball that involved people like myself that I knew nothing about. And of course, I played baseball, and I played on all black teams till I was probably in the maybe 9th or 10th grade. And so I knew I knew the ability of black ball players, and I knew one person is in the team. So after a while, I think it might be 4 or 5 books out then. Of course, Only the Ball Was White was out.
Okay.
And they just pretty much focused on people like Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige. Yeah, and most of the guys, Charleston, people that were in the Hall of Fame. Of course, having played ball, I know no one man is a team. It's a team effort, right? Exactly. Because you got 8 other guys, no matter what you're doing, that need to pitch in. So when I wrote my first book, and I started writing it in probably about 84, 85. And no one would publish it. People didn't think that the Negro Leagues was going to be a viable topic, but I kept pursuing it. And the publisher I had sat on it for 5 years. And when it came out finally in 1992, it won the best baseball book of the year from Spitball magazine, and had 600 photographs. And it probably took me about 10 years to put it together. And since that time, in the world of Negro League baseball, there's probably 400 books, but nothing's ever exceeded that book with the 600 photographs. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called The Negro Baseball Leagues: A Photographic History by Phil Dixon. That was before I was using Phil S. Dixon. Okay. To differentiate myself from all the Phil Dixons that's out there. So, so that was the beginning. And so we talk, jump forward. I'm going into about my 43rd year of doing this history. And for me, I was able to help people like Buck O'Neil to become famous. And by saying that, what I'm saying is most people would know him by the Ken Burns documentary.
Yes.
But yeah, he was already featured in my book in 1992. I had already done a documentary with him. And even the interviews that I'm using in the book, those were done in 1985. Ken Burns' documentary didn't come out till 93, 94. Exactly. So, yeah, but I had a chance to meet a lot of other people too. I can talk about some of those, and tonight as well.
You just mentioned a guy who I personally believe 99.9% of people on Earth know nothing about. They may know Buck O'Neil. they may know Satchel Paige, they may know Jackie. Or as recently I found out that he hated the name Jackie. He preferred to be called Jack Roosevelt Robinson. We know the big names. The name that stands out the most, and most people know nothing about, is Rube Foster, the guy who created the Negro League for the express purpose for economic advancement of the black community. Can you give me a little background on Rube Foster?
Oh, yeah. Rube Foster came to mind recently when Deion Sanders went to Colorado.
Yes, thank you. That's why. That's another reason I reached out. I'm sorry. I got excited.
Yeah, one thing I interviewed, his son had just died shortly after I met his wife. So I didn't get a chance to meet Rube Foster's son, but I did get a chance to meet his sister, who was, they were all staying in the apartment that Rube purchased in Chicago.
Okay.
And but over the years, I did a lot of study on Rube Foster. And the reason why I thought about him when I thought about Deion Sanders was back in 1910, between maybe 1905 to 1910, Rube Foster was the greatest pitcher in America. And people came to Rube Foster and they said, why don't you take all this money that these white teams are offering you? They were offering him 3 and 4 times what he was getting when he was with the Leland Giants starting in 1907. Rube, of course, was the manager. And he wouldn't take it. But Rube gave them a simple explanation. He said, look, as long as we're together, we can beat anybody. He said, but if they take me from you, then you won't be able to beat us on the new team if they take me, right? He said, and after a while, they won't need to play you. He said, and it won't be long before they won't need me, and we're all out of business. That's Rube Foster. This guy had tremendous insight, and he was dedicated to the uplift of our people.
And that's the issue that sports fans, I have a buddy, he's actually, at this point, he's a business partner. He has a show called Wrap It Up. And we're going to combine our networks in the near future. And one of the people that's on his sports show called Wrap It Up, he used more harsh language than that, but he had issue with Deion Sanders too. And one of the things that it didn't bother me because I understand that we live in a capitalistic society, but I do wish that our folks had more insight in regards to just understanding that capitalism is what brought us here in the first place. Somebody capitalizing off us. And a lot of people go, hey man, how can you get upset that somebody's trying to get paid? And my answer to that is, knowing the history of Rube Foster, knowing he said, hey, I'm starting Negro Leagues for us, and not only us, but for the advancement of us financially. And when Deion left and everybody said, well, he's offered $5 million, you know what was the first thing that came to mind? The record industry. They offer you Cadillacs, they offer you cash up front, and they own everything, and they do away with you. That's when terminology like irrelevant start. You're no longer the focal point of the community. You're no longer relevant. And that's because, I'm not top 10, but I'm still top 45. And it seems as if Deion Sanders, if you ask me, I could be 100% wrong, and I would love to hear your opinion on it. I could be wrong, but it seems as if Deion settled for being, a duke in somebody else's kingdom when he could have been a king in his own kingdom, much like Rube was. What are your thoughts in regards to that? Wow,
that's a good way to put it. I think about the history and I think about the future. Down at, in Jackson, Deion had a movement. Now he's just doing what everybody else did. And he's just elevating himself. He's got a coaching job. He has nothing more than a coaching job, a high-paid coaching job. But he had a movement, and he traded the movement. In my estimation, based on the way I've, looked at history, and there's a future in that. But there was a movement that he had started, and it was going to be a good thing. And here's the thing: he's not the only one who can do that.
Right.
So hopefully somebody will jump on. And I'm telling you what, it's even easier to do in basketball. So that's the next fertile territory. And you know what? We've lost a lot in this country. We sacrificed a lot, but you know, uh, hey, let's just keep hoping for the best and hoping someone will pick it up, and let's keep moving to a place we've never been, but we've always wanted to go.
Exactly. And that's why I wasn't truly upset, disappointed indeed. That's why I wasn't upset though, because I do, like, people kept saying, hey man, he laid out the blueprint. Nah, you can't lay out. When you are Deion Sanders, when you are Muhammad Ali, when you are Ray Robinson, when you are LeBron James, Michael Jordan, there is no blueprint for that. Those are one of one. But I do believe what we can do, like, my thought process is this. We're not gonna, he got Travis Hunter out of Georgia. That's a one-off again. But I believe when you watch baseball, people like Albert Pujols came out of nowhere. Nobody had him on their radar. And that next thing you know, he's the best ball player. He's the best player and a surefire Hall of Famer whenever he hangs up his cleats, or he hung them up this year. And every year when we watch football, you have DeMarcus Ware, who played for the Cowboys. You have Harrison, who played for the Steelers. You have Mack, who played for the Raiders, and you got John Starworth and a host of others that came from nowhere. They were not on anyone's radar, and I believe the HBCUs, both, especially basketball, both football, baseball, and basketball, should focus on the children who are not being recruited as of yet. You're old enough to remember a guy by the name of Felipe Lopez. Speaking of basketball, he was the hottest guy out of New York. And Barnes, he used to be the coach. I can't think of Rick Barnes, who used to coach at the University of Texas. And he went up to New York, and everybody kind of laughed at Rick. He was like, "Hey, you think you're gonna get a shot? You got Felipe gonna go down to Texas?" He's like, "No, I'm looking at his teammate. His teammate went down to UT, played 3 years, got drafted, and played in the NBA for 10 years. I think that's where we need to be looking at for the HBCUs. The guys who are being overlooked, there are literally millions of young men and women being overlooked every day. And if we get those people at the HBCUs, along with what you said, focus on us instead of, I'm the greatest University of Missouri fan. I'm the greatest Illinois fan. I'm the greatest Morris Brown fan. I'm the greatest Spelman College fan. I'm the greatest Jackson State fan, or Prairie View, or wherever the young person is. I think if we focus on those people, and at that point, if we don't have to repeat what happened to the Negro Leagues.
Yeah. Well, one thing we need to learn from history, and so it just so happened, you just said what happened to the Negro Leagues. Well, I get the question all the time. What happened to the Negro Leagues after Jackie Robinson was picked up by the Dodgers? And I've listened to many people discuss this topic, but let me tell you my spin on it.
Okay.
I came up in the latter part of the 50s, early 60s. And once again, I'm playing for all black teams. I live in an all black neighborhood. I go to an all black school. There wasn't a white teacher in my school. I didn't get a white teacher till I was in the 8th grade. My church was all black. Finally, a white family came, and they wanted to work with trying to integrate places. And so they would take young people. But so the early part of my life was that. Then there was the movement that came along where now they couldn't stop you from moving into a neighborhood. So
1968.
Yep, there you go. So black people began to leave the community, and they quit shopping the stores. And some of them just left their old houses, right? And then they went and bought somebody else's houses. And they were paying good mortgages on those communities, and there was no plan. It just happened. And so people, did what they felt they were bettering themselves, right? And after a while, you get 40 years down the road, 50 years down the road, and you got a whole generation of people saying, well, we used to have this. We used to have a movie theater. We used to have a skating rink. You know, we had stores, we had shops and service stations, and it's all gone because there was never a plan in how to integrate that we worked. And if you look at the Negro Leagues, that's exactly what happened to the Negro Leagues. You had Effa Manley, who's in the Hall of Fame, and a lot of people, they celebrate Effa Manley. I really don't, and I tell you the reason why. Effa Manley also started a movement. She sold the first player.
Wow.
To the major leagues. So remember Jackie Robinson, they didn't pay for Jackie. They stole Jackie.
They picked him, yeah.
Yep, they picked him. They didn't pay him.
Yep.
And so she sold the first player. So there's now selling $1 million players for $5,000 and $10,000. She set the bar. Now here's the interesting thing, like a Sam Jethro, he was sold and maybe $5,000. A few years later, Sam Jethro was sold. He was from the Braves to someone else. Anyway, and the deal involved $100,000. So why was the Negro League selling players for $5,000, $7,000, $10,000? And even if you go back and look at a player like Lefty Groves, they purchased him from the International League, 1929, 1930, they paid $100,000 for him then. So now you're selling Willie Mays, you're selling Hank Aaron, you're selling all these great players, Willard Brown, and you sold so many of them that the whole system changed. So no longer could the veteran Negro League player find a job in the Negro Leagues because now all the owners are trying to find some young guys who they can sell for $5,000 and $10,000. They put themselves out of business in 1949, 49, 50, and we put ourselves out of business in 1967, 68, 69, 70.
Exactly. And that's the thing that really bothers me about this trend because, y'all, I'm not going to whitewash it. It seems as if this complex of somebody else's ice being colder than ours has led to the demise financially of the community because, for those who don't know, our great sister Oprah Winfrey has recently sold the OWN network to Discover. So 95% of it to Discover. And we follow this blueprint that the people who keep us in this box say, hey, well, you're supposed to build something up. Why would you want something worth $4 million when you can have $4 billion, when you can have $8 billion? But at some point, our community needs to realize that if you have something worth if somebody's willing to pay $4 billion for something, that means extrapolate that down the road, and you will have $20 billion before you know it. Because no one invests in anything and anticipates the break even. Or I'll just get my $4 billion back and I'll be happy. How much money has Viacom made from BET? How much money will Discovery make from the OWN network? Because you built the foundation of the OWN network, which is us, and then we'll continue to buy into it. It just bothers me to no end that we continue to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. I just found out recently, within the last month, even like a month before Dion did this, that after Say Hey Kid left the Negro Leagues, there was no more Negro League World Series. That was the last one he played in was the last one.
Yeah, 48.
And then we complain that we don't get opportunities, but we had opportunities in front of us. And that's another reason I want to bring you on here, because the last time we had a conversation, you were telling me about how significant Chicago was to not only the Negro Leagues, to the sports world. Can you please expound on that? Because I have a gigantic Chicago base, and I want people to understand how great we are. That's what I've converted the sports show that you were on initially to a community empowerment show and have conversations with people much like yourself.
Yeah, I'll jump right on Chicago. One thing about it, the conversation we're having tonight is not your typical conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about history that should be known,
Mm-hmm.
that is not. And so, people say if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And
Yes.
so that's one of the reasons why we continue to make the same mistakes over and over again, because we haven't been real good students and keepers of this history. And I know even if you look at the Negro Leagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's probably about maybe 3 black guys, maybe 4, who actually have done anything significant with the history.
Mm-hmm.
So who's writing our history?
Now it's the word broken down. His story.
Yep. And you know what? I try to, when I write my history, I try to write baseball from a black point of view. People, if you read my Dizzy Dean book ought to scare people, because I dug deep and showed people how newspaper covered us. And I didn't just say, I would say, how they would I would take an article where Dean played maybe against Charlie Beverly. Dean might have struck out 3-4 people. Charlie Beverly struck out 11 to 15 people. And Charlie Beverly's name is not mentioned once in the article. And some of these people were, major writers. I call names. I name names. I tell you the history. You can go look it up. But, going back to your question about Chicago, at the turn of the century, or before the turn of the century, there's 2 baseball meccas for black athletes, and there's New York and Chicago. If you're in the West, you want to get to Chicago. Because once you get to Chicago, now you're going to be able to interact with those teams from New York. And the same thing once you got with teams in the New York area, then you're going to be able to interact with those teams in Chicago. So everybody was trying to get there. I know there was a great baseball player named Bingo DeMoss who ended up playing for Brooke Foster. Bingo DeMoss, he came there with 2 teams in 1 year in 1910. I came with the Oklahoma Monarchs and to Chicago. Then he came back later in the year with the Kansas Giants. Hey, there's a good ball player. After a while, he ended up being on Ruth Foster's team. So that was the place to be. You had black ownership. Frank Leland is someone that people don't talk about. They talk about Foster, but Leland hired Foster twice. He was the one who bought Foster out of the South. The story goes, Dave Wyatt, who had came from Hot Springs, Arkansas, he noticed that when he got to Chicago around 1898 or something like that, that they needed more pitching. He said, man, there's a guy down south. And a lot of the guys in South, they would get your advance money, then they never show up, right? So Frank Leland didn't want to send the money. And Dave Wyatt said, I'll pay for him myself. Ooh. And Dave Wyatt paid for Ruth Foster to come to Chicago, and the rest is history. But he stayed 1 year in Chicago, and then he decided to jump to a white team. So he knew about what's going to happen there, and he went out to Michigan and played part of the year. And then the next year, Home Run Johnson got him to come for play for the Cuban X Giants, and they were based out of New York. And so he came to New York, and he just blossomed from there. He just kept going, and then he became the Ruth Foster that we know. But if you think about Chicago baseball, you can talk about Kaminsky and Wrigley and all those people, but if you don't talk about Ruth Foster and the impact he had on that city, and the doors that he opened, and the entertainment that he brought to Chicago's South Side, you shouldn't even be talking about baseball in Chicago. And Ruth Foster was the man. Frank Leland is kind of forgotten, but he was the man before Ruth Foster. And then there was another guy named William Peters. William Peters had the Chicago Union Giants, and he operated his team for over 24 years. And I always say, why is F. Manley in the Hall of Fame and William Peters not, or Frank Leland not? And so, I can make some great discussions. I could have some great conversations, you know,
Let's
about
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Because I see that's the thing. My entire mission with this is for those conversations to happen. I want everybody to start looking. I want a list of your books before we go. I want everybody to start looking into them, because this is why I think, you know, yes, I can't think of it. I can't think of the medical term, but it was a term. It was a situation that was created, and I was reading Dr. Joy DeGrew's book, and it's basically I can't do it ism. I know it's and I'm doing a horrible paraphrase, but what they did, they discovered that if you have dogs, they used some dogs, and they said they put these dogs in the cage, and when the dogs ran towards the fence, they got electrified, and they turned the red light on. So every time you got electrified, the red light would come on. The dogs would realize, oh, you know, almost like when you tell a child hot. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they stopped electrifying the fence, and then they would just turn the red light on. So what they did was they continued to pull back, and they said, okay, what if we just put the light? What if we just didn't do? What if we just had any light? And then they did any light, and after a while, you don't even need to do anything, because you are mentally trapped. You mentally trap the dogs into a situation, and not to refer to our community or our people as dogs, but what they've done is allowed us. They've put us in this box, and they said, anytime you try to run out, and you know what you know, then they just start leaving the door open. The dogs won't leave, and you see that with our community. They box us in. They got us believing, hey, if I leave out of this box, we may get shot. We may get hurt. Well, and then we create our own reasons for not trying to overachieve. Nah, nobody ever done it. We can't do it without other people. And then, like you just said, instead of us continuing to build our own community, what we do is wait for somebody to hold our hand and walk us out of the box. And at some point, with those stories that you tell, with the stories that I want you to convey, I believe this will inspire our community to just walk out that open door, because the door is cracked, and now we need to walk out, buy books like yours, invest in HBCUs for both track and field, baseball, football, basketball, and most important, academically, because when you're on the campus of an HBCU, I do believe it's a totally different, I know for a fact, it's a totally different environment, because now it's not a professor instructing you. It is to use a colloquialism, that's my uncle, that's my aunt, that's Aunt Smith, that's Uncle Johnson. And they are embracing you and uplifting you with the information and pouring into you with the information they have. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's an excellent point. Now, I just happen to have 3 HBCU graduates. I have a son who graduated from Langston, a son who graduated from Fisk, and a daughter who graduated from Howard. So I'm just not talking this. I'm being about it. And actually, I had a scholarship. Some people know it, some don't. But I also play trumpet. Matter of fact, I will be doing my first program for 2023 in Claremore, Oklahoma, on Martin Luther King's birthday. Of course, I open it up with Lift Every Voice and Sing. I bring my trumpet and do a solo. Right? Most people don't. You know, I might play for a white audience. They've never heard the song. They've never heard the history. So you're just introducing not just the baseball. You're introducing all kinds of history that they should know. Yes. It's American history. So yeah. But I had a scholarship coming out of high school to go to Bishop College in Dallas, Texas, and instead I went on the road with a funk band, and we headed right down south, and so I had a real black experience playing the Chitlin circuit all across the South and things like that. So we came to Chicago too. So, but that was my first, opportunity to leave the community. Now, I don't know if you knew this, from 2014 to 2018, I took a 200 city tour.
And you know what? You were in the midst of that when you were on last time.
Yeah, it started off being 90 cities,
Mm-hmm.
but ended up being 200 cities. And actually, it was more visits than that because, like say if I went to Wichita, Kansas, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I might have went every year during that period, sometimes twice in a year, but I only counted it one time because I went in 200 different. So I went to Omaha 5 or 6 times, St. Louis many times. So I went to many different places, and some of those towns, they had not had a black person come to speak in those towns in generations.
Wow.
And I think some people came out of curiosity to see, what is this guy going to talk about? Who is this guy? And what kind of history is he going to talk about? Because I was bringing them history of their own community where the black teams that came into this community. And so I was bringing them history that they hadn't bothered to even capture themselves. Plus, I could tell you about the people who came there. I might talk about specific players, why you need to know about this guy. Mm-hmm. Some of the places still had the parks there. Mm-hmm. I would go and take pictures at the park. But it gave me a chance to interact with people that I normally wouldn't interact with. And it was real interesting because when I first started the tour, Barack Obama was president. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I must have ended in 2019 because Donald Trump was president.
Yeah.
And I would go into communities and I remember I was somewhere and the guy came up, was talking baseball, and then he left. And my wife said, "Hey, did you notice his hat?" I said, "No, I didn't pay much attention to it." And of course, he had the "Make America Great Again" hat. I was out in Hayes, Kansas, and people came and they were wearing guns on their hips. I said, "Who brings a gun to a baseball talk?" But that's the space that we're in now, right?
Yeah. That's
I only got stopped once by the police. That was coming outside of Oklahoma. I was at the toll booth where I was pulling up in the toll booth, and we had a line where I was, and I looked over and said, "Hey, nobody's in the other line." I said, "Let me just cut over there." So I cut over there, didn't put my blinker on, and the police, he's waiting on the other side. He stopped me back. My stuff was squeaky clean, right? Now, I did get stopped coming. One time I was coming out of, Illinois, and I was going into Missouri. As you go right around St. Louis.
East St. Louis.
Yep, there you go. I'm trying to think. I was right in there somewhere.
I already know.
A black policeman pulled me over.
10 o'clock, 2 o'clock over there, man.
Yeah, he pulled me.
I already knew.
I wasn't speeding or nothing. He pulled me over. So he said, "Where you going? You seem like you're in a hurry." I said, "I'm going home." I had spoken Toledo or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, and I said, "Hey, I'm just going home." I said, I just came from speaking. I do baseball history. I said, "Hey, look, I got a flyer in the back seat." So I showed him the flyer. He looks at the flyer. He said, "Oh, you write books?" I said, "Yeah." He said, I've been wanting to write a book." He said, "How do you write a book?" And you know what? He started talking about how to write a book. I said, "Well, you just contact me and we'll go ahead and write the book. And I'll show you how to, find a publisher and everything." He said, "All right, then what you think?" He said, "You have a nice day." And I went on back home. So cut back into Missouri. But he's right there at the border, at the border for you.
Hey, so, man, trust me. I've had my experiences down there. I went to visit a family member. They have a prison down there. I went to visit them.
Now, which one? What city?
In East St. Louis. It's East St.
Okay.
Louis. And it's Southwestern. That's what it's called. Uh-huh. And I didn't even get a chance to see him. I went in. It was me, his mother, and his brother. And we walking in, and I hand him my ID, and the man said, "Hey, you're supposed to be in here." I said, "No, I don't." And are we just playing? I said, "I'm not. I'm out of here, man." I said, "I'll see y'all. Y'all get out." Man. Because if you'd have went a little bit further down the road, it's the only Jack in the Box in the state of Illinois, right down the road, right, wow. Probably right down the road from where he pulled you over at. And man, those police are bored down there, man. It's like,
well, I tell you what, I've been around long enough that I had enrolled my son into Fisk, mm-hmm. and I was coming back, and that was the same week that Brown had gotten shot in St. Louis, in the little town.
Yeah,
and I was coming back. Huh? Ferguson. That's right. And I just happened to be going through there, and I was able to experience that whole thing because as we were pulling up, I think I stopped to get gas, and I saw the TV on. They were talking about they were having a riot down there in St. Louis. And I told my wife, I said, looks like we're not going to be able to stop in St. Louis. And as we went through, police cars were coming the opposite direction, headed to Ferguson, and we didn't stop that night. Another time, back in, I guess this would have been early 90s, after the Rodney King incident in Los Angeles. There was a group of Negro Leaguers headed by Sammy Haynes, who had me come out to Los Angeles when they opened up the mall, and I went to a Magic Johnson store. And as I flew over the city, I could see the neighborhoods burned out and things like that. And that was Rodney King. Now, remember, I'm just doing baseball history, right? But now I will tell you this, though. You're in Chicago, right?
Indeed.
When I was 19, 20 years old, I couldn't have been more than 22. I went to hear a guy, and he was speaking. My cousin was at a college. She said, "You got to hear this guy." So I went to hear him, and his speech was so inspiring that it changed my life forever. And that was a host by the name of Lou Palmer.
Oh, I remember Lou Palmer, man.
Lou Palmer.
Oh
man, I heard Lou Palmer, and I was never the same. And most people don't know who Lou Palmer is. You're around Chicago, you have an idea, but once you leave Chicago or you leave that area, man, but I'm telling you, you're listening to somebody who was influenced by Lou Palmer. And then I will also tell you early on, maybe this might have been maybe 79, 80. I marched with Ralph Abernathy.
Ooh.
I had a chance to engage Stokely Carmichael, and as a matter of fact, I have an autograph by Stokely Carmichael. It's right. I was going to get it framed here. This was Stokely Carmichael was speaking somewhere. I don't know if you can see it here. He was speaking in Colorado. I was out in Colorado, and he was speaking. And after the event, I took the flyer from the event and had him sign it. And he said, "We must always work, study, and struggle for the masses of our people." And he said, "I'm going to sign it in my new name." And he put Kwame
Ture. Yeah.
I have it right here. So these are the things that is I'm learning about baseball, just minding my own business. Of course, I knew a lot about music because I'm traveling around. I was being influenced by these people. And even my book here, I have a book. Let me reach over here. This book here is called Andrew Root Foster, Harvest on Freedom's Fields. And I couldn't think of a title for it. I knew I wanted to have Andrew Root Foster in the title, but then I went to hear Angela Davis speak. And I listened to her speak, and I came home that night, and I said, "A Harvest on Freedom's Fields." And that became the title. People, when you look at this book, you would never think of Angela Davis, right?
Right.
But all of these people have poured these thoughts, and I'm still trying to comprehend what it is that I've learned, and how can I, help the people who are living in my generation to benefit from what I learned. And once again, people think that you're just a baseball writer, you're writing about baseball, but if you ever go to hear one of my talks, if you want to hear, well, so-and-so was a 300 lifetime batting average stuff, that's not my talk. That's not my talk. I'm going to tell you something about the ball player that you never imagine, kind of like when you said about Ruth Foster or Frank Leland. I can tell you about, Frank Leland went to Fisk. Did you know that?
Did not know that.
Yeah, he did. He did. And Ruth Foster's brother, Willie Foster, he was the dean of men at Alcorn. So,
and see, those are the beautiful stories that I want people to understand. That these guys, somehow, some way, within the last 65, 70 years, the terminology of dumb jock has been fashionable. But one of the things that I introduce to people who watch my show is this. It used to be cool. It used to be sexy to be intelligent. When you look at people like my man Paul Robeson and Dr. Drew, the dude who created the blood plasma, he was a track athlete. He couldn't get into school in America, so he went up to Canada and became a track star up there, and then became a doctor up there. And then you got people like, again, Paul Robeson. This dude was an honor student at Rutgers. He went to NYU to get his law degree. He learned, I think, over 18 different languages so he could sing the songs that he wanted to sing to people in 18 different languages. Mm-hmm. I mean, this dude was a Renaissance man. So dumb jock is something that was invented within the last 65, 70 years to make you feel as if these people were just people who just could play ball and that's all they could do. And these men of our community, these men and women of our community, because Paul Robeson's wife, I can't think of her name right now. I keep want to call her Annie Malone, but that's not her name because that's the lady who helped Madam C.J. Walker.
Right.
Paul Robeson's wife was just as great as he was, and we don't get these things. And I do believe that this is the problem. You know, that's why I need people like you as a part of my universe. You know, and at any time, you definitely know you got an open seat to come in and drop the knowledge on us anytime you want to. But like you said, the Stokely Carmichael thing. The ironic part is, remember that movie a couple years ago? I can't think of the name in it. It Denzel Washington's son was in it.
It was the Black Klansman.
The Black Klansman. Do you know that movie was based on the interaction that you had with at the time you had interaction with Stokely Carmichael, man?
You know what? I was sitting in the movie theater watching the movie.
Okay.
Now, you know, and they had them taping Stokely Carmichael, right? Mm-hmm. From his speech. And I told my wife, you know what? I was there. And I said, I can prove I was there. I had a flyer. And here's something else, too. When Stokely Carmichael, I went up to him and I say, Stokely, I'd like to get your autograph on the flyer.
Okay.
Stokely said, well, if I sign for you, all these people going to want me to start signing autographs. So he said, you just hang tight. He said, when I finish answering all their questions, he said, I'll sign it for you, right? So I hung tight. All these people, you know, they came up around him and stuff like they asked questions, everything. And then they all leave. Mm-hmm, I go over, he signs my paper. Now, remember, everybody's gone, right? Okay. Except me. And so as I was leaving, since nobody's there, the poster was still on the wall. The poster was still on the wall. So guess what I did? I tore the poster off the wall. I still got the poster from the 70s. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
I still got the poster. So not only do I have his autograph that night, but when I saw the Black Klansman, I was telling I think I went with one of my sons. I said, I got that. You know, another one, my son went with me to Cooperstown. Okay. And so we went into New York, and he was going to come back about 2 weeks later to go to the Arthur Ashe tennis facility. So as we're driving, you know, he starts talking about the tennis facility and Arthur Ashe. And I said, you know what? I used to talk to Arthur all the time. I said, I got letters from Arthur. Wow. He said, you do? I said, yeah. He said, can I have one? I said, well, let me see if I can find it, you know, find some of these letters. And at that time, Arthur Ashe was doing his book. I have it over here, A Hard Road to Glory. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Yes, indeed.
He was working on that. And so for Christmas, I gave my son a picture of Arthur Ashe, and then I turned around and gave him one of the letters. I had him framed up, and he can put it on his wall. I'll keep it forever. But that was the kind of interaction I have. I have letters from Jackie Robinson's wife, from Ruby Dee, talking about her playing in the movie. Right. And so I had a chance to, Lena Horne was another one. And that's now kind of, let me shut my door if some people coming over right quick.
Okay.
So it was, you know, when I came in and started doing this history, it was just a wonderful period. And once again, I'm coming out of the civil rights mentality. I'm thinking about how I can help our people. I'm young. I'm in my 20s. And and all of that is, you find it in my books. So once again, if you come to one of my talks and you're thinking that, you know, I'm going to give you the same old baseball talk you've heard a million times before, you better think again, because not only do we have a lot of fun, but we get a lot of knowledge. And one thing I was going to mention about Paul Robeson, you mentioned Paul Robeson. I got to tell the story. Paul Robeson, he was coming to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. This was in the 30s or maybe early 40s. He's going to perform at a Municipal Auditorium. Mm-hmm. And Municipal Auditorium was practicing segregation. This is not the South. We're talking about Kansas City. So they wouldn't let black people sit on the floor. So Paul Robeson got wind of that. So he said, the only way I'm going to perform, he said, black people got to be able to sit on the floor. So they said, no problem. So when Paul Robeson comes out, the curtain opens, they got white folks on this side and black folks on that side. They were still practicing segregation, but by then he can't go back, and he has to go ahead and do his program. But yeah, you had segregation was pretty bad in the North. It's just like it was in the South.
That's the biggest farce in the history of the world, because then all you had to do was reference the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and him saying he had never experienced the type of racism that he experienced right here in Chicago, Illinois.
Oh yeah.
And ironically, he was right down the street from where I am presently.
Yep. You. Oh man, there's so many stories. I was in Milwaukee, mm-hmm. and a guy came. He gave me a book. I should have had him sign it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't his book. He gave me a book about the Colored House of David, and it was a Brashler, the same guy who did wrote Bingo's Long's Traveling
All-Stars. Yeah.
Yep. He had written this other book, and the guy came over and he gave it to me, and he said, "Hey, before you leave town, why don't you come over to my museum?" I said, "Well, what's your museum?" He said, I started the Black Holocaust Museum. I said, "Yeah, what?" And it was a guy who was almost lynched. His friend was lynched in Indiana. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And through that experience, he started the Black Holocaust Museum. And most people never knew that existed. And I had a chance to meet him, but I met him while I'm traveling around with baseball. Baseball has been very rewarding to me, just the things that I've learned and experienced. It's been truly an adventure, an amazing adventure, not just from the athletes that I met, but from just the collective human toll that I met. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, because I remember the last time you were on the show. I think I don't know if that was your first time or you were interacting with Willie Wilson at that time, former center fielder for the Kansas City Royals.
Sure.
Yeah. And again, this is one of the things. Baseball is such a universal game that's how history ties into everything. Baseball, our history is connected to it. Like what you said with the Paul Robeson thing. People don't realize that Paul Robeson was under attack by the United States federal government because he wouldn't announce that he was an American. He said, "I'm a citizen of the world." At that point, they revoked him and W.E.B. Du Bois's passports, and they leave them, basically on the continental North America or the continental U.S., the 48 of the U.S. And those are kinds of things that needs to be talked about. Like the thing with Indiana. When you talk about Indiana, this is where the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan was. There's people right here in Chicago that don't realize when you look to your left, you are looking at basically the home of the rebirth of the Klan.
Yeah. And once again, it's not the South.
Right.
And so, it's the history of America is so amazing, but you have to move around this country and see. And I know a lot of our people, when I go into small towns, a lot of people don't want to go to these places. But I tell you, I go into these small towns. I tell you, one time I went to a town, I was going to Colorado, mm-hmm. and I knew I was going to go to Denver. I think I did Colorado Springs, and I did Cheyenne, Wyoming, right? And I knew I had to come back across Kansas. So I was at some teachers conference. I said, "Hey, I don't want to come all the way back without stopping somewhere. So if there's somewhere I could speak, I'll be happy to stop if you want to invite me." So this lady invited me to come to their town. And this town had roughly 375 people. They didn't have no black people in this town. So I accepted. So I came and went across and went to their town. And when I got there, there was this old ball player, and it was a white guy named Hoop Huggins. And so they said, "Hey, we want you to meet Hoop Huggins." So I started talking to Hoop, and he said, "I played against the Monarchs. They came right to our town in 1949, 50, somewhere in there. And I said, well, why didn't you tell anybody about it? He said, no one ever asked. He said, matter of fact, he said, one of my teammates, we just buried him this week. And so I said, man, that's fascinating. So we got some history, and they took some pictures of me and Hoop shaking hands and that kind of thing. And then when I did my program, there were about 200 people there, and which is almost the whole town. And they said I would have had more people than that, except it was harvest time. So some people couldn't come. All right, so we leave. He figured 300 some odd people in a town. No big deal, right? Why would you even go to a town in western Kansas with 300 people, right?
Okay.
Well, one day I'm watching the Royals baseball game, the Kansas City Royals, and it was a rain delay. And so I got up from the game, and I'm walking around. Then all of a sudden, someone calls me on the telephone. They say, hey, I just saw you on the Royals rain delay. I said, what was I doing? They said, well, you were sitting next and taking pictures of some guy named Hoop Higgins. He said it was his birthday, and they sent a picture in. They said, this is Phil Dixon, Hoop Higgins. So long story short, I got more mileage out of going to that town.
Yeah.
So I never say no. I try to take things in deep, serious consideration, because sometimes I'm a kind of spiritual person. God puts things out there for me. And so I have to take a look at them, because I don't think any of this stuff is accidental. And that's just one story. And so I got a chance to meet him. There was another time, there was a white guy. I was in Marysville, Kansas.
Okay.
And this guy comes, and I had gotten a picture from the library. It was the team called the Brennan team and the Kansas City Monarchs, 1939. They're all standing there together. And I put this picture in my PowerPoint, and I'm giving a speech. And this guy comes to me, and he's 98 years old. And he looks at me. He says, that's me in that picture. I said, that's you? He said, yeah, I played against the Monarchs in 19. He's 90-something years old. No one knows this guy exists. And he said, that's me right there. He points to him. And so, man, we hit it off real good. White guy. I never met this guy in my life. We're talking about baseball. We love baseball. He loved baseball. So the next year I went to a town about 30 miles from that. So he was 99 then. This guy drove 30 miles over to hear me speak. A 99-year-old guy. The next year he turned 100, and I sent him a birthday card for his 100th birthday, and I think he died at 101.
Wow.
But this game of baseball can really bring people together if you allow it to do that. But I think sometimes we need to have open conversation about our politics, what we believe, and talk. And so baseball has allowed me to do that. And I don't just do it in big cities. I do it in some small cities. And I've been in quite a few Illinois towns as well. I was in Belleville.
Okay.
That's down around St. Louis. Let's see, I was in Spring Valley, Illinois. Matter of fact, Robert Gilkerson of the Gilkerson Union Giants, the owner, he's buried there in Spring Valley, Illinois. Let's see, there's been a few more that I've been to. And I'm trying to think. I was at the DeSable Museum in Chicago, but it's been
Southside Chicago.
Okay, maybe 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm looking forward. So, are you still in Chicago there?
Yeah. I'm for now.
Okay. Well, if there's something comes up and I can come to speak, I'll bring you a program that second to none, and
please do
talk about history. So, right now I don't have Chicago on the radar, only because nobody's asked.
Oh man. Well, we need to put something together, because one of the things that fascinated me about speaking with you the last time you were on is you were telling me how you were speaking with some of the last of the players that, the last surviving players of the Negro Leagues. You want to go into that a little bit for the people who missed that opportunity to hear those stories?
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Negro Leagues, I came along at a really good time, right? Because I was able to talk to some true Negro Leaguers. Like Professor William Lowe. I met him in Memphis. He was the one who recruited Satchel Paige to the Chattanooga Choo-Choos, right? This is before he got to the Birmingham Black Barons in 1927. And but these guys were around. Chet Brewer, in Los Angeles. First time I went to Los Angeles, Chet Brewer. I stayed with Chet Brewer, and Chet Brewer, I'll show you how monumental he was. Chet Brewer, he went out to Los Angeles after his career was over, and he later ended up putting black youth together and forming a baseball team called Chet Brewer's Rookies. And on one of his team, he had 8 guys that went to the major leagues from one team. And, he had Doc Ellis, Roy White,
Doc Ellis. Yes.
Bobby Tolan, Roy White, Bob Watson, Willie Crawford.
Bob Watson of the Yankees? From the Yankees?
Yeah, who was the general manager? Yeah, Bob Watson. I talked to Bob about it. He had Bob Watson. Who else did he have? And guess who his bat boy was? Eddie Murray. And,
Baltimore Orioles, Dodgers, Eddie Murray?
The Hall of Famer.
Yes,
that was
sir.
his bat boy. So you talk to these players. This is one guy. And so I had a chance to meet some of these people. I knew Coop Bell very well, him and his wife. I knew Judy Johnson very well. Got a chance to interview like Rap Dixon's brother, Oscar Charleston's brother, and numerous people around Kansas City. I knew Satchel Paige's wife real well. So it was an interesting time. And so you jump forward a bunch of years, right? And so probably by the year 2000, people are interviewing players that played maybe in the 50s.
Okay.
Who had a chance to go to the minor leagues, like a Hank Aaron or who I did know, Hank Aaron. I've never met Willie Mays, but they're interviewing those guys and guys of lesser known stature who were not when they weren't there when it was total segregation.
Okay.
And so I had a chance to meet those guys and then the later guys. But if I had to trade it, man, those older guys, man, their story was so unique because they didn't have a chance to get out of that league. So they were pioneering baseball in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, Mexico. Ray Dandridge, I talked to him. And so Leon Day, I remember we were in York, Pennsylvania. I was speaking in York. I say, Leon, I'd like to have a ball player with me because that would make, the visit really nice. And so I said, hey, I can get them to pay for you. So we worked it out. Leon Day comes up to York, Pennsylvania. He's with me for about 3 days. And when we about to leave, he said, let me buy you a drink. He said, because I haven't had to spend one dime since I've been here, been eating and drinking everything. And Leon was a character. He had bad feet. So in the end, but Leon told me a story. He said, you know what? He said, one time I was playing with the Willie Mays All-Stars. He said, and he said, I went down to the bar one night to get a drink. And a lady came in. She said, who are you? He said, well, I'm with the Willie Mays All-Stars. She said, I know you. You're Willie Mays. He didn't correct her. Yeah. She thought she was with Willie Mays, right? Well, they ended up going up to the hotel room, so she thinks all these years she probably thought she was with Willie Mays. She was with Leon Day. He told me that story, but the ball players had all kind of great stories. Oh man, it was just a wonderful time to start. And at that particular time, since they were only talking about Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson, those kind of people, when you met the other people on the team, you began to get other stories, And because of that, that's the reason why a person like Buck O'Neil is in the Hall of Fame today. Yes. Buck O'Neil used to say to me, he said, you're the one who started all of this. And by that, he wasn't saying that I wrote the first book or I was the first person to take interest in him. But he noticed when I came on the scene, the energy that I had and how I was able to get people on radio, TV, get them interviews. He noticed that because for a long time, they weren't paying any attention to Buck O'Neil. He had the same stories. He could still tell the same stories, but he was not telling them to the public. He was just telling them to his friends and associates. And so they needed somebody to help them come out of the dark. And I will share one more thing with you. You can probably relate to this. Because I collected baseball cards.
Okay.
I went to baseball card shows, right, all the time, starting back in '77 when his hobby was getting really hot. And they would never bring a black ball player to a baseball card show. As long as they could get Ted Williams, Joe DiMaggio, Whitey Ford, Lefty Groves, they didn't need you. But when you get to the 90s, those guys are dying. They wanted to keep the shows going. So what do you think they did? All of a sudden, they started bringing the black players, not only the major league guys, the Negro leaguers. They weren't. I took Buck O'Neil to his first card show, and paid for. I took him and a guy named Connie Johnson, used to pitch for the Orioles and White Sox in Chicago.
Yeah, I knew that name, Connie Johnson.
Okay. Well, I took them to a card show, paid for it myself. I have pictures. I paid them $50, sit at my table, and I had a baseball card set that came out. And but I will tell you one more thing about Buck O'Neil. In 1987, the Royals had just they had hired one black guy in the front office, and he was about to take another job and go to a college, right? He'd only been there for 6 months, short period. And so they start asking around, and I had a major league press pass because I wrote for the Kansas City Call, black newspaper. Okay. And so they asked Buck if he had any recommendations. He said, "There's your recommendation right there." He said he at the ballpark every day. He knows baseball, and that's how I went to work for the Kansas City Royals as assistant director of public relations. So I owe Bucko a great deal as well. And so you might say those years we worked in tandem. And we got a lot of things done.
And you know, the thing is, man, Phil, that's the thing, man. It's, I studied Dr. Greg Carr. He's the head of Africana Studies at Howard University. And he's also one of the law professors that he comes from Tennessee State University. And then he gets his master's and a graduate degree and his PhD at Ohio State, right? Okay. But he speaks about this on a regular basis. It's social structure, and that is the traditional American outlook of things and how they see us and its governance structure and how we interact. And I believe the governance structure is why those stories aren't being told. Not that it's a bad thing, but me and you speak a different language than the social structure. Me and you can say one or two things and it triggers 10 or 11 things because we know those things. And the social structure are totally unaware that because, as we spoke about at the very top of the interview, because we have been so socialized to inculcate ourselves into the traditional structure, we've left those stories behind. So that's why I believe Buck O'Neil paid homage to you, because you are a seminal piece to the puzzle. Because without you, we may just be finding out some of those stories now. It's this professor and author named Mbate Pot. He makes the statement, every time an elder transition, it's like a library burning to the ground. And you've prevented literally dozens, maybe even thousands of libraries from burning to the ground. So that's why I believe Buck O'Neil gave you that credit, because without you, that bridge, no one stands in that gap. I personally do, because I haven't seen anybody who focused on that gap in particular. So hats off to you.
Yeah. And once again, the life I live put me in the position to be able to talk about some of the things, because when you write a book and you make a statement, you need to be able to support that statement the best you can. Yes. And I've seen things written in books about black baseball players, and I challenge people, and they don't really have an answer, but they wrote it. They didn't do their scholarship, or they just don't know what they're talking about. So, I'm proud of the achievement that I've been able to make, and my work's not done yet.
Please don't stop.
I've tried to figure out what to do next. I got a couple more books on the burner. If people want to read something good, I say most definitely read my book about Dizzy Dean. It's called The Dizzy and Daffy Dean Barnstorming Tour, Race, Media, and America's National Pastime.
Okay.
If you want to know more about Chicago, read my book, Andrew Rube Foster, A Harvest on Freedom's Fields. If you want to just see...
That's my next purchase.
Okay, and if you just want to just see pictures from the Negro Baseball Leagues, it's out of print, but you can find copies. It's the Negro Baseball Leagues, a photographic history from 1992. And if you want to see something new, groundbreaking that you might be able to do yourself, you can record your family. And now you can use QR codes. You can have your grandfather talking to the next generation. You don't have to wait. You don't have to just do the tapes and have them sitting on the shelf. You could put it in a book and send it to all your people, and they can hear your elders talking. If you want to see how that works, pick up my book, John Buck O'Neill, and The Rookie, The Man, The Legacy. And let's see. Oh, and if you just want to see how to merge one city's history, baseball history, my first book was called The Kansas City Baseball Trivia Quiz Book. 30 years ago. So I guess I'm going to my 31st year as being a published author. And I still feel like some of the best is yet to come. I've got a boxing book I'm writing. And I've got a book on Jack Johnson that I need to finish. Another fascinating character. And I got a book about a lot of the dirty deeds that were done to stop us from getting into Major League game. I have a catchy title. I want to give the title away because maybe I'll see somebody else using it. But believe me, it's a book about the dirty deeds. And so we're just going to keep talking about it. And hopefully I'll get to Chicago this year and get a chance to, meet you in person and shake your hand and say, keep up the good work. And who knows, you may be the next Lou Palmer.
Hey, that's whew. Please, hey, from your mouth to God's ear, because I was introduced to Lou Palmer right around the same time you met him in 1979, 75, 76, 76 through 79. He used to be on WJPC in the morning with Tom Joyner, and he would drop those Black History facts. And man, I got yelled at so many mornings because, we scrambling to get to school. And I would stop. I mean, hey, and they would have this and they would drop some Lou Palmer facts, and I would go to school and act like I looked it up, lying to the homeboys trying to be smart, man.
Unfortunately, Lou was on radio in Chicago for many years.
Man.
Yeah, but if you go to like YouTube, I've only seen 2 clips of him.
Wow.
On the whole YouTube, somebody has that.
Yeah, WVON. It was WJPC and WVON. He moved from WVON to WJPC. Guess what? That was the progression of Tom Joyner. He went from WVON to WJPC. Then he was WGCI, and then he became Tom Joyner.
Well, I tell you what,
was with him.
If somebody has some tapes out there, Lou, man, it's people like myself who would love to revisit some of that knowledge that he was dropping.
You know what? I want you to wait when we close out. Me and you need to work together because history is my thing. And ironically, you was like, I didn't meet my first white teacher until 8th grade. I did the same thing in 6th grade, Miss Dow. And she literally told me I should be an anthropologist because I was so enamored with history. So we need to definitely talk after the show because that's my life's blood. I mean, I will plug into YouTube. I will plug into books. I have apps that allow me to read books for free. So I don't even have to purchase the books. You just pull up on the app and read it. And that's probably why I'm wearing glasses now, because I'm sitting up in the bed at 2 o'clock in the morning in a dark room reading a book when I should be asleep, But I definitely must commend you for the work that you do because I'm telling you, you are literally standing in the gap. I visualize you holding the hand of the people of the past and reaching for the people in the future, and you are bridging the gap because without you, there are literally thousands of stories. I remember the last time we were on. We've been on for an hour and 15 minutes. Last time we were on 2.5 hours. And if you want to check my archive, when I moved over to this platform, built for this network, that's the one that me and my two partners created. I transferred your interview over to the new platform, because when I realized I was going to leave, I started downloading all the stuff that I knew I was going to eat. And when your interview was one of the ones that I cherish because I got enriched. You gave me boxing. You gave me Chicago history. You gave me National Baseball history. You were traveling throughout the South, meeting the surviving Negro League players. You were giving. It was this one boxer that you told me about. He had speed. You said he was almost equivalent to Sugar Ray Robinson. I don't remember what his name was.
You're talking about Tommy Campbell.
There you
Tommy
go.
Campbell. Matter of fact, I have a whole page dedicated to Tommy Campbell. They said that he had the fastest left since Joe Gans.
Yeah, and you know what?
Joe Gans was a good one.
And I was wondering why I remembered that. I'm left-handed. That's why that stayed with me. Anytime somebody left-handed, I'm rolling with him. It's the only left-handed dude I don't like is Steve Young, but he ain't not good. But
right. Yeah, that's one of the books that I'm trying to finish. I was in Seattle. Oh, you'll love this story. And then I'll get ready to close so I can get ready to put all my stuff together to head to the Rose Bowl. But I was in Seattle and I was speaking at the Buffalo Soldiers Museum. And actually, it was in Tacoma. And the guy comes over to hear me speak. And so after the speech, I was talking to him and they introduced me and said, hey, this guy used to play baseball. So I said, oh, yeah, I used to play baseball. I said, who'd you play for? He said, I played in the Houston Astros chain in the 1960s. So, me being who I am, I said, did you appear on any baseball cards? He said, yeah, I was in the 67 set. I said, okay, I'm going to have to go look for that. I said, what's your name? He said, Bill Point. No, he said, Pointer. Pointer was his last name, Aaron Pointer. Mm-hmm, and so then I said, you have a business card or something? So he put out his business card and it said NFL ref and it said Aaron Pointer. So I said, well, you a referee? He said, oh, yeah. He said, I was line judge in NFL for 9 or 10 years, right?
Okay.
So he signs his card. So I'm looking, I said, where are you from? He said, Nashville. I said, the Pointer sisters from Nashville. He said, I know, those are my sisters. Wow, the Pointer sisters' older brother. I said, man, this world too small. And so I knew the only one I knew by name was June. And but I had seen him years ago. June wasn't with him, but I knew June had passed. So he was giving me the family history and everything. But you get a chance to meet those people. And then I went to Seattle the next day, and Bill North came over. And, Bill North, and to sit there and have some great times talking to Bill North. And matter of fact, I took this picture here of there's a Bill North and myself and another guy named Brian Hunter, who used to play for Seattle, Houston.
Yeah, I know Brian Hunter. I know. Well, I don't personally know him, but I know of him. Yeah,
he was there, and he's holding my Buck O'Neill book. But you know what? If I went through all the things that baseball has allowed me to do, to meet people inside and outside of baseball, and the places that I've been, just traveling, and some towns, I'm telling you, towns where a black person hasn't been there speaking in generations, not even a pastor.
Wow.
But you know what? They welcomed me because I came with good spirit, and I came with something that America still loves, is baseball. And I just use that to bring people together as best I can. And but you got to tell the truth. You got to tell the truth, and that's what I try to do. I don't try to sugarcoat it. It's all baseball, but how we arrived at where we arrived at, it wasn't always equal, and it certainly wasn't the same.
Exactly. It is a galvanizing point of history. And ironically, you mentioned the Buffalo Soldiers. When I started doing this program, I interviewed my cousin, Lavelle Kennedy, and he let me know my uncle, Elmer Kennedy, was a Buffalo Soldier.
Oh, great. See, that's good history.
I didn't know that until that night. And I haven't talked to him since that night. I really need to step up my game and get back in contact with him.
I tell you what, I know a guy who does research. You give me a name, and he will run your family's history down and give you the complete military record. So I'll be happy to share that information with you when we get
Please do, because I need to know. My father, John Williams Sr., my grandfather, Richard Pollard, I need all that. Yeah, definitely. But I want to thank you again, Phil, and we'll talk after I shut it down. Let me have about a minute of your time after I close out. I do want to thank you for coming on Rappin with HRap. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with anyone who can enrich us, give us history, and hopefully trigger some intellectual fact finding, so we can continue to expand on our history, the history of the country. Like you said, our history is U.S. history, and it's just either it is erased, glossed over, or just buried. And people like yourself and others are doing us a tremendous service, keeping it in the forefront of the community. So thank you once again. And as usual, I will see you guys, everybody but Phil. Well, Phil, hopefully you'll be watching. But I'll see you guys Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for Build and Destroy, while I attempt to build up the community and destroy the lies and the propaganda about the community. Thank you again, Phil. Thank you for the listeners. Thank you for everybody who supported. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend, and tune in 6 p.m. Central Standard Time Tuesday. Have a good evening, everybody. I'll be right with you, Phil. One second.
4-letter words or 4-syllable words won't make you a poet. It will only magnify how shallow you are and let everybody know it. And if they look at you like they think you're insane, or they call you scarecrow thinking you ain't got no brain, or start telling folks that you suddenly gone lame, or that the white folks have finally co-opted your game, or you really don't know, they said that about me a long time ago. If they finally start telling people that you lost your nerve, that's what they said about Johannesburg. You ain't insane. You have got a brain. You haven't gone lame. You have got your game. Remember, keep the nerve. Keep the nerve.